You're tuned in to Ask the Master Auto Technician. Car questions? Get answers right now. Call 850-763-0555.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guaranteed. Beep, 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 yeah.
Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday morning, bright and early. I've got Rob Lapham calling all the way from St. Joe, Florida. He's running for District 2 Congressional District. We know who the candidate's going to be for the Republican Party. That's Neil Dunn. We know we got Mr. Dartland from Tallahassee area as a Democrat. After 2 or 3 recounts, they got him by, I think, 150 votes or less. He won that one. And now we got Rob Lapham, who's calling all the way from St. Joe, and he's going to be the Libertarian candidate that will be on the ballot the November 8th general election. Rob, I was reading about your A block, Rob, takes aim at job-killing federal regulations. The B block, Rob, looks at spending and taxation issues once again. This is on your Facebook wall. Would you like to explain a little bit more about what you put on Facebook on 9/7/16?
Sure. And James, please jump in if
please.
If we cross the line as far as federal communications fairness regulations and so forth. But it is a matter of public record. When you look at the, first of all, let's acknowledge that right now the leading candidate for the 2nd Congressional District is the Republican, Neil Dunn. And Dr. Dunn has on his website page, he has 10 issues that he has listed. A plain reading of those issues will show that in summary, they are carefully crafted political rhetoric. They don't give the specifics. They state what he feels about certain issues. And the issue that bothers me the most has to do with government spending. And what he says on his website is offers no proposals to control government spending, but I think he's pandering to those who would like to see federal spending cut. He says on his website, more than ever, we need a balanced budget amendment that will force Washington to tighten its belt and rein in wasteful spending, unquote. Now, he's not proposing to take any action to stop spending. Rather, he is saying we need a balanced budget amendment. And, James, that very point was raised in 1936 by a congressman from Minnesota, whose name I cannot remember right now, but that was the first introduction to the U.S. Congress of a balanced budget amendment 80 years ago. Nothing has happened.
No.
And anybody who thinks that something's going to happen now is wasting their time. That is not the approach to take to cut spending. Certainly we can use a balanced budget amendment, and, James, if it happens, it will be through a never-used provision of the Constitution.
What is that?
Which is the states themselves can call, I think it's 2/3 of the states, can call for a constitutional convention. And in that constitutional convention, a balanced budget amendment could be introduced and passed. And states are more likely to pass it. Washington is not going to do it.
No, I don't think so.
But in any event, I'm sorry.
I think you're absolutely right. That's been around for a long time. Everyone talks a good game, but when it gets down to the actual nuts and bolts of how to cut the budget, it all seems to be, well, it's got to be the other guy, not my representative doing it. You know, he's doing his job. It must be the other guy wanting to buy more things and make government grow. And that's what I see. I mean, even here in local government, it's everybody seems to want to be Santa Claus. You know, how can we buy? Well, I shouldn't say buy votes, but it seems to be that way. You know, let's go ahead and buy a park, or put it in a convention center, or in the probably in the federal part of it, probably pass a federal law that benefits a special interest groups, and that's what I see causing our problem. Everybody's pandering to votes.
Well, that's the problem on one side of the coin. But there are other problems associated with when you ask the question, why do we end up with so many lousy politicians? And we won't talk about parties for the moment.
Okay.
We'll just make a general statement.
General statement.
The other problem that we have is that too many voters go to the polls and they pull their lever, or they fill in their little circles with their pencil, whatever it is that they do to vote, and run it through the machine. They think they've done their job. The problem is that we have, and it's nationwide, I think, is the problem of the uneducated voter.
True.
Certainly, most anybody who is aware of their surroundings knows what's going on and what the candidates are saying as far as the presidential race. But when you get down below that national presidential level, the amount of information, solid information, that the average voter gets is really pretty limited.
It is.
And I would suggest to you that many voters go to the polls, and they may have seen a TV ad on, an ad on TV the night before saying vote for Blogs. Blogs is a fictitious person.
Right.
Here. Or in the car on the way to the voting booth, and they have heard a radio ad for the same thing, vote for Blogs, or passed a road sign that says vote for Blogs, and they get into the voting booth knowing absolutely nothing about what Blog stands for. Maybe they know he's a Republican or a Democrat if the race is a partisan race. And they feel they have done their duty by pulling the lever or voting for Blogs, and they have not studied what Blog stands for. Has he followed through on his campaign commitments if he was an incumbent or had run for office before, or if he was in business? Did he deal with people honestly and fairly, and so forth? And so many people are influenced just by advertising and don't take their own trouble to learn what the candidate really stands for and to choose the candidate who is best for them. And then they wonder why government is so terrible. And the fact is, a number of people have been had by candidates who run for office using these platitudes and without real substance. And it's a real crying shame. We really have ourselves to blame.
We are.
And if I wasn't a libertarian, I'd be saying, there ought to be a competence test and a general knowledge test, and there should be some type of mechanism so that people who vote know what the heck they are voting for.
One of the things libertarians have asked for, there ought to be what NOTA, none of the above. And if a majority of people filled out a little oval of none of the above, then those two cannot run next time. There needs to be another race with two different candidates in it. And people say, well, you don't want to have that. You got to have someone. Well, no, you've got to have someone that people have confidence in. And that's what happens is people vote the lesser of two evils. And we've been doing this for a long time, ever since I can remember. I grew up, don't vote for Goldwater, he'll put us in war. And we voted for Johnson, and we went to war. So I worry, and I'm going back a ways right there. It's just amazing how it seems like we seem to vote for things that sound good, but when we get those people in office, they do just the opposite of what they promised to do, and that's what I see happen. I remember having people in the same position you're running from. Steve Sutherland ran on he was the one before Gwen Graham. He ran on a platform of smaller government. He ran on being, is it constitutional? He ran on so many things that we in the part of the Tea Party really, really enjoyed. They sit there going, this is exactly what we want. He got into office the first time, and then immediately we started seeing things happen, like he voted for the Patriot Act. He voted for the National Defense Authorization Act. He voted for so many laws that curtailed America's liberties and freedoms, all for security. And that's the scary part when they get into Washington. And that's why people say, and that's what I'm worried about on other candidates out there. They say one thing, and once they get into office and they have to start rerunning for office immediately as soon as they get into office, because 2 years later they're up again. And that's the scary part. We have this revolving door of elections. And I don't think our founding fathers really intended it to be like that, but it's turned into a big cash money machine. And it's frustrating. I know it's got to be frustrating for people running for office. It's got to be frustrating for those that are in office. But what we end up doing is getting politicians that become professional politicians. And then after they stay in 2 or 3 years, they become lobbyists on K Street.
You bet. And you make the valid point that our founding fathers did envision. Citizen legislators. Leave the farm for a couple of years, come to Congress, apply your best knowledge and so on, then go back and let somebody else handle it, and not be subject to the phenomenal number and power of lobbyists today. James, you mentioned President Johnson in your remarks, and every time the President Lyndon Johnson comes up, I kind of grind my teeth. And it's not just that he was advocating a guns and butter philosophy. It's not just that I was drafted during the Johnson administration and decided not to cross the border to go to Canada. I figured, well, I may as well do my duty, but I was not happy about it.
A lot of people weren't.
But the thing that President Johnson did that affects us even today, that really upsets me, is he declared in 1964, he declared war on poverty. he was going to eliminate poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many billions of dollars he appropriated the first year. He got Congress to go along with it, but basically he enhanced the welfare state out of all proportion. Mm-hmm. And the effectiveness of Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty was shown 50 years later in 2014, mm-hmm. when the General Accountability Office did an analysis of what had gone on during the previous 50 years with President Johnson's war on poverty. And it found that it stated the war on poverty at the start in 1964, the poverty rate as determined by the United States government was 14%. Mm-hmm. And the GAO added it all up and found that the United States government had spent over those 50 years $20 trillion to eradicate the war on poverty. $20 trillion is familiar to us because it's almost what our national debt is right now.
Right.
It's a separate thing, just coincidence. So the government spent $20 trillion over the 50 years to eradicate poverty. And the GAO also reported that in 2014, the poverty rate was 14%. And that program has been an abysmal failure. We've spent massive amounts of tax dollars to accomplish an objective which was not accomplished.
You're
and
right.
Just jumping, that's a total failure.
Well, and we only got about
is getting a lot of press these days. If welfare was not available except for U.S. citizens,
right.
then a lot of unlawful immigration would
right.
stop, and you wouldn't have to do much more. Certainly wouldn't have to build a wall, in my opinion.
Well, you're absolutely. There's a lot of things out there that I see that just seem like, wow, how did they come up with this? But we had a war on poverty, and we got just as much, if not more, poverty we had back then. We have a war on drugs. We have just as much, if not more drugs we had back then. I'm wanting them to declare a war on farmers markets. If they declare a war on farmers markets, we'll have more farmers markets on every corner than we've ever had in our entire life. They've already started a war on taco stands out there, so maybe we're going to get more taco stands. I don't know. But it is strange out there. It seems like every time the government says they're going to do something, they accomplish just the opposite. And that's something that even Ronald Reagan warned us about years ago, speaking of the great communicator. He was able to say, if they come with those words, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, run. Dude.
Yeah. Absolutely. No.
And that's what's going on. Rob, we got about 30 seconds left. What would you like to tell our listening audience here?
Well, I'm not going to advertise my website and so on. I'll just leave you with something for next time we talk. You mentioned the war on drugs and, by extension, the DEA. Mm-hmm. And DEA and FBI and ATF are three agencies of the Department of Justice. Can you name any of the other 57 agencies in the Department of Justice? We're out of time.
I can barely.
Think about that. You'll have to look it up because nobody knows. The government is so big, it is impossible to remember all the different 60 agencies in justice.
I can barely remember the alphabet. I just know they have a whole litany of alphabet acronyms for them: ABC, ADF, ATF, you name it, they got them. And it all costs money, and that's how you grow government. And it's that incrementalism that costs you and I, the taxpayers, money. By these good things that we think we're doing, we end up creating a quagmire of problems down the road. And that's not the purpose of government. Rob, thank you so much for calling. I appreciate that. That's Rob Lapham. He's running for U.S. Congress. You can catch him out there on the internet somewhere. What is it? rob4congress.com. I'm putting that out there, not him. So if you got what'd you say? And spell out the word for, rob4congress.org. Am I saying that right, Rob? I think I am.
That's right. ROBFORCONGRESS.org.
Sounds good, sir. All right, I've got, who have I got coming on here? I've got Brian Armstead. He's going to be giving a review on another car, so we'll be right back, everybody.
James Auto Center, we fix it right.